Hello and welcome to the Jesus Witch podcast. I'm your host, Lena El-Sayali, also known as Lena the Jesus Witch on TikTok and Instagram. The Jesus Witch podcast is a show dedicated to opening the conversation about including Jesus in witchery practices. The goal of this podcast is to not be evangelical. The goal is to spread the love, light, truth, acceptance, and oneness that is Jesus Christ himself. Here at the Jesus Witch podcast, we believe all people are loved by God and all people are loved by Jesus. We believe in community and the power of fellowship. We believe in giving whatever you reasonably can to help your neighbor who's in need. And above all, we believe in the power of creating a relationship with Jesus that is authentic and unique to you. Join me for new episodes of the Jesus Witch podcast every single Monday, and be sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app. Hello and welcome to this week's new episode of the Jesus Witch podcast. I'm your host, Lena El-Sayali, also known as Lena the Jesus Witch on TikTok and on Instagram. This week on the podcast, we are going to be talking all about Samhain and how to celebrate that as a Jesus Witch and how I'm going to be celebrating it this year. But before we jump into this episode, I just wanted to remind you of a couple of ways you could help support the Jesus Witch podcast so I can continue making episodes for you. Firstly, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're currently listening to us on and give us a rating of 5 stars because that helps get the word out about the show. The Jesus Witch podcast also has a Patreon with 5 different tiers of benefit levels ranging from audio transcriptions of the Jesus Witch podcast to spellcasting circles with me, episodes that are ad-free and exclusive to Patreon. So if you want to check that out, you could click the link in the show notes page, and everything that we talk about right now is going to be in the link in the show notes page. I also have an Etsy shop. On my Etsy shop, you can grab tarot readings with me where I channel Jesus. I have soul contract readings, astrology readings. I absolutely love doing birth chart readings, and it's really important for me when I do a birth chart reading that you learn about astrology and you learn about yourself and you learn about your astrology specifically. So I don't just talk at you during a birth chart reading. I teach you about your signs. I teach you how to work with those specific planets. I absolutely love doing them. I actually got to do an astrology reading last night, which is why I'm really hyped up about talking about them, because I just realized how much my passion lies with astrology. So whenever somebody gives me the opportunity to share their energy in that way, I'm always so honored to do so. So if you want to grab some sort of reading like that with me, that's on my Etsy shop. I also have Bible-based oily spells that are essential oil rollers that you could put on your skin to help anoint yourself and to manifest your spells. I have Jesus and Christian Witch mystery boxes, all different kinds of things over on Etsy. I also have a PayPal and a Cash App that you could send a donation directly to if you would just to help fund the show. And of course, I have a bunch of free resources on my TikTok and on my Instagram. Following both of those helps the show. And I also have a free Discord group called the Jesus Witch Church, where it's a big community there. We have over 300 members. It's so much fun. We do full moon circles, Jesus Witch church services. We have people who lead Bible studies in there. So there's a lot of different things going on there and different free resources for you to access. I just ask that you be 18 or older if you're going to join the Discord group. There's also Patreon perks on Discord. So if you join Patreon, make sure to send me a DM with your Discord name so that I can add you to our Discord group. And if you are a Patreon supporter and you're listening to this now being I don't have my Patreon Discord perks, please send me a DM. Oh my gosh, we would love to have you in the group and in the little secret chat. So yes, that is all the little housekeeping stuff that I needed to talk to you about. You can find all the links for everything that I just talked about in the show notes page, plus a couple more things my baby registry for the Pisces, and other different little goodies are in there. So just go ahead and over to the show notes page if you would like to find anything. But now that all of that's out of the way, let's talk about Samhain, what it is, and how I'm celebrating it, and how to celebrate it as a Jesus Witch. Samhain is one of the 8 Wheel of the Year holidays. The definition or the description of Samhain that I found said that the Sabbath we call Samhain represents the opportunity to once more celebrate the cycle of death and rebirth. For many pagan traditions, Samhain is a time to reconnect with our ancestors and honor those who have died. This is the time when the veil between our world and the spirit realm is really thin, so it's a perfect time of year to make contact with the dead. This definition comes from an article that I found about Samhain, and I will link that in the extended show notes page that is posted to Patreon. Obviously, Samhain has many different names that it could go by. There's Samhain, there's Halloween, there's Hallows Eve. There's just so many different traditions associated with October 31st. But at the root of all of them, except for like the commercialized candy Halloween, but at the root of most of the October 31st traditions is connecting with ancestors. And then in Hispanic traditions, you have Day of the Dead or Dios de los Muertos, which is celebrated on November 1st or through November 2nd, which is obviously the day after Samhain. And on November 1st is also called All Souls Day, which is celebrated in the Catholic Church, which is basically the Catholic or the Roman Catholic way of celebrating Dios de los Muertos. That's specific, like making an ofrenda and like, putting out offerings for your ancestors and things like that is very specific to Mexican cultures and traditions. However, in like Italian traditions, at least like what I know from growing up Roman Catholic, we'd have All Souls Day, and on that day you'd put out pictures of your relatives and pray for them, pray for their veneration, pray for them, to be in heaven, like all of those things. So it just depends on like your culture, your traditions, how you can celebrate, what you can celebrate, and obviously like making sure you're being respectful of other people's cultures and traditions while you celebrate your holidays as well. But anyway, let's talk about a couple of different ways to celebrate Samhain as a Jesus witch. These are more, I would say, kind of like generic witchy. Like you could fit any deity into these activities. I did write a couple that are very specific to like Christian and Jesus witchery, but Wheel of the Year holidays, in my opinion, are very pagan. If you want to celebrate a very specifically like Jesus Christian witch holiday, I feel like that's where like Christmas and Easter come in. But I feel like it's important to celebrate as much as you possibly can as a Jesus witch, because Jesus tells us in the Bible to celebrate. He tells us to, take joy in the world, not just like live in a very like drab way, in a way that we're not appreciating life, like doing things that make us appreciate life, make us appreciate the world around us. And the Wheel of the Year holidays are definitely meant to help us appreciate the world around you. So I think that like when you're a Jesus witch or a Christian witch, the easiest and most simple way to celebrate Wheel of the Year holidays is to do more quote unquote pagan activities, but invite your Abrahamic deities into those activities if you feel so called to do that. So let's talk about a couple of different ways you can celebrate Samhain as a Jesus witch. So firstly, if you have an altar, putting some sort of like fall items on it, like leaves, acorns, these are all things you might have done for Mabon anyway, but just like refreshing those little fall items that are on your altar, or putting Halloween decorations on your altar, like a mini jack-o'-lantern, a witch's hat, like little skull and crossbones, whatever you associate with Halloween, putting it there, just to signify a different kind of year, or even decorating it with pictures of loved ones who passed on, because Samhain is a lot about celebrating and remembering those who came before us, and I think that having them on your altar and like right in front of you is a very good way to do that. Then you could celebrate a saint's feast day that's in October. I especially recommend this if you have Catholic ancestors, because they always get excited when you celebrate a saint, even if it's not necessarily a saint that they worked with. There's 7 different saint feast days in October. The first one was on October 1st, which was Saint Teresa. The second one is the feast on October 2nd is Feast of the Guardian Angels. On October 4th is the feast of Saint Francis of Assisi. On the 5th is Saint Faustina. On the 7th is Our Lady of the Rosary. On the 15th is Saint Teresa of Avila. And then on the 22nd is Saint Pope John Paul II. There are several different feast days in October that you could consider celebrating if you feel called to do that. Another thing that I would recommend doing for Samhain, if you can do this on the 31st, that's great. If not, doing it sometime during the month of October. Oh my gosh, I don't know why that was such a tongue-tied sentence for me. But visiting a cemetery where you have a loved one who's buried. And if you don't have like a cemetery where a loved one's buried locally to you, too. You could always just go to a local cemetery and just ask the spirits that are there, ask like the guard spirit if it's okay if you hang out there before you take anything from there. Make sure it's okay. Leave offerings to different people that you feel called to leave them to. And like not just like don't I wouldn't personally recommend, like, unless it's your like relative and your family, I wouldn't recommend leaving witchy stuff on some random person's grave, because that might like spook their family members. But if you want to like put like a regular like pebble on top of the grave or a coin, something like that, just to give them a little bit of remembrance, that's great. Obviously leave some sort of offering at the front of the cemetery. Again, wouldn't leave witchy shit there. I would leave something like very respectful, like a stone, a coin, something very benign, because like at the end of the day, as much as like I feel like everybody's allowed to be open and loud about their practice, I also believe in like being respectful of other people. And people are going to cemeteries to grieve. They're not usually going there to do witchy things. So being respectful and mindful of that before you step foot into a cemetery is really, really important. Another way that you could celebrate Samhain is to make a meal that your ancestors would have eaten, or make a meal that's like from your area of the world. Like, so like I'm Italian, but Italian American food is very different from a traditional Italian food. But because I grew up with Italian American food, I could make an Italian American dish and like say that's from like my ancestors, sort of thing. And another thing that you could do to celebrate Samhain is to make some sort of seasonal themed food with Jesus or another Abrahamic deity. Jesus is very much a pumpkin spice girly, in my opinion. Like, when I got my first pumpkin spice chai from Starbucks of the season, he was jumping up and down. Like, he really loves that energy. Pumpkin spice is also extremely protective. It has cinnamon and clove and nutmeg in it. So it's protective. It brings abundance. It brings, like, awareness and clarity, because nutmeg's very good for, like, being clear. So it's a very good herb to have in your house anyway, or spice mix, whatever it technically is, to have in your house anyway for like kitchen magic. When people like blow cinnamon in their door on the first of the month, me personally, I use pumpkin spice because I feel like there's a lot more magical energies in it. So yeah, like having pumpkin spice added to your Samhain celebration, one, it's great for the season, and two, it's just a fantastic, like, protective, abundance bringing spice anyway. So making some sort of like seasonal food. So you could do like a pumpkin spice latte, pumpkin bread, chai cookies, like whatever, calls to you during this season to doing that with like Jesus in mind, or whatever Abrahamic deity that you like to spend time with. That's a real fun way, real cool way, real simple way to celebrate Samhain. Now a quick break from this week's episode of the Jesus Witch podcast to talk about a few ways you can help support the show. One way you can help support the creation of the Jesus Witch podcast is to become a supporter of us on Patreon. On our Patreon, there are 4 different tiers that you could choose from, and they're all named after tarot cards. We have the Fool, the Magician, the Hierophant, and the High Priestess. In the Fool tier, you get early ad-free episodes of the Jesus Witch podcast, extended show note pages when available, Christian tarot grimoire pages, and access to our monthly community oracle reading. In the Hierophant tier, you get everything from the Fool tier, tarot spreads to help your connection with Christ, Spirit, your higher self. I also like to put out new tarot spreads for each full moon or new moon, Wheel of the Year holiday, and zodiac sign. In the Magician tier, you also get 1 Bible-based spell grimoire page each month. This teaches you how to incorporate the Bible into your own spell practice. In the Hierophant tier, you get everything from the Fool and the Magician tiers, as well as a Happy Mail package from me every single month with the ingredients to make a spell, as well as an extra Bible-based spell page for your grimoire. And then you get access to our spellcasting Zoom each month, where we do the spell that I sent you together. In the High Priestess tier, you get everything from the Magician, Fool, and Hierophant tiers, as well as an extra Bible-based spell from the Sun and Moon Oily Co. in your Happy Mail package each month, and a one-on-one Zoom call with me every single month to discuss your practice, how you're growing, and any suggestions that I could give to you to help you on your path. Patreon tiers start at $6.66 per month, and you can find the link to that in the show notes page. Another way you can help support the show is by shopping at my Etsy shop, the Sun and Moon Oily
Co. Over on the Sun and Moon Oily Co., I offer Bible-based spell oils, ritual bath salts, Jesus Witch or Christian Witch specific mystery boxes, and custom spell oils. Over on my Etsy shop is where you can also book different types of readings with me. I offer tarot readings for your inner child, channel messages from Jesus or from Lilith. I also have a listing for general tarot readings. You could grab a soul contract reading between yourself and another person, or yourself and a deity that you're working with or curious to work with, or even grab an astrology reading for yourself or an astrology reading for your kiddos to help you parent them better and more effectively. There's also Jesus Witch merch on my Etsy shop and so many other things that I am planning on adding to my shop. So head over to the Sun and Moon Oily Co. to check that out. Another thing you can do to support the growth of the Jesus Witch podcast is join our Discord community. The Jesus Witch Church is our free 18-plus Discord community where we host Jesus Witch church services and moon circles. This is your place to ask all Jesus Witch or witchy questions in general and make some really awesome friends. You can find the link to our church in the show notes page. Another free way you could support the Jesus Witch podcast is by sharing this show with a friend and rating it on whatever podcasting app you're using with 5 stars. Leaving us a nice review really helps get the word out about the show, and don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app. Another thing you could do to help the creation of the show is send a donation to the Jesus Witch podcast via Cash App or PayPal. It takes a lot of time and effort for me to create the Jesus Witch podcast, and getting donations helps me get the support and help that I need to be able to create this type of content for you. Donations also help keep this podcast free to everybody, so if you love this show and the information that's being put out there, please consider sending a donation to my PayPal or my Cash App. The username on both is the Jesus Witch Podcast, but the link for both of those can be found in the show notes page. And the final way that you could help support the creation of the Jesus Witch Podcast is by sending me a gift. In the show notes page, I have the link to my Amazon wish list. Everything that I put on this wish list was put there to help create content for you. Simply put, buying things off of this Amazon wish list helps me so that I don't have to purchase them myself. So I can put more of my resources in towards making the Jesus Witch podcast. If you would like to support the Jesus Witch podcast by buying me a gift or in any other way, you could find all the links to everything mentioned in this ad in the show notes page. Now let's get back to the show.
Spending time with loved ones is also another great way to celebrate Samhain. Samhain's all about ancestors, and a good way to build ancestor connections and relationships is to be friendly with the family you already have. So being intentional with that during this month is, it's great if you have family that you could do that with, and I definitely recommend that. And then finally, doing some sort of ritual to connect with your ancestors and using Genesis 17:7 to charge it. This verse says, "I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants, and in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be your God and you, to you and your descendants that are after you." I like this verse because it's promising like a lineage of spirituality, if that makes sense, and it just like kind of reminds me that we're all together and we're all like connected, and I really like that it mentions like generations, so I really like this verse for Samhain work. So those are all the different ways that I came up with that you could celebrate Samhain as a Jesus witch. Like I said, some of them are more like generic, like witchy things, but I feel like you could just ask Jesus's energy to be in there and like, have it work for you. So, and I explained in the beginning like why I think that pagan holidays or like Wheel of the Year holidays are celebrated a little bit more like pagan with a flair of Jesus, you know what I'm saying? At least that's how I rationalize it in my head. That's what works for me. If you do something differently, like that's awesome. Join the Discord group and tell us how you celebrate, because I would love to know, and get more ideas and all those kinds of things, because there's always room to grow. There's always room to change. There's always room to learn. So yeah, that's my little, okay. Anyway, let's talk about how I'm going to be celebrating Samhain this year. And some of these ideas and things that I wrote down and things that I'm going to be doing are influenced from a blog post that I found about celebrating Samhain with kiddos. And I will leave that link along with the other one to the other post in the extended show notes page for my Patreon supporters. So firstly, carving and painting pumpkins. We could talk about like why we like to make jack-o'-lanterns to light up the night, night to illuminate things, like the idea of, Jesus being a light and us being a light with him, like that kind of stuff. So I really like jack-o'-lanterns for that. I think painting pumpkins is just a really fun, creative exercise that everybody can get into, and they last a little bit longer than jack-o'-lanterns, so you could have them in your house for more of the season. And kids really like painting pumpkins. And I think when you're doing magic and celebrating like witchy things with children, it's important to make them feel like they're having fun. Because then one, they'll want to continue those traditions as they grow up, and they'll like think it's like, cool and fun and exciting. And two, like creativity is really important for kids, and it's important in spell work too, because if you're not like creating spells, if you're not creating manifestations, if you're not creating ideas, it's going to be a little harder to cast things. So I like to create with my kids and like encourage like fun memories and, all of those like good things. They don't even necessarily like know Samhain is called Samhain. We mention it a couple times, but it doesn't really stick. It's more like Halloween, and they just know that we celebrate these seasons a lot. And as they get older, they'll understand why. And I just think it's like creating a cultivation of joy and a cultivation of like really celebrating life with them. So yeah, we like to carve and paint pumpkins. Obviously, dressing up with my kids and going trick or treating. We used to do a lot of like family themed costumes, but I have boys who really like to dress up as boy things, and I'm a girl who has a lot of girly clothes, and I don't want to spend like $50 to be Princess Peach with them, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just not worth it for me. So I've kind of let go of the whole, and especially now that I'm having a third kid and it's going to be a girl, I'm assuming that she won't want to dress up in the same like costume themes as her brothers, and that's okay. So, like, I'm starting to let go of that having to have a theme sort of thing, but what we all have to do is dress up. Like, that's so important. It's so much fun. So we dress up every year. Sometimes I still do a theme with like my mom and my cousins. We'll all like, text and like collaborate and be like, okay, this year this is what we're doing. Like last year my cousin Catherine and I were both pop stars. I was Taylor Swift, and she was like Aubrey Hepburn. So we were both, well, Audrey Hepburn's not technically a pop star, but we were both like celebrities sort of thing, you know what I'm saying? So there's always, I just like doing that. I like dressing up. I like making it fun. Showing my kids that even as an adult, you could have fun. You could dress up for Halloween. I've dressed up for Halloween every single year of my life, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Baking and decorating Halloween cookies is also a really fun thing to do. So at Target, they sell like the Halloween cookie decorating kits, and I bought one of those to do with my kids. But I also really love those like Pillsbury, just like cheesy cookies, like that you always had in elementary school and they make for every holiday. So we do those around a lot around Halloween and Christmas time. So we already had the ghost ones this year, and I think honestly today I want to do a Halloween movie with my kiddos and do the pumpkin ones because I have the jack-o'-lanterns in my house. But we do this all season long. We watch Halloween movies, we make cookies, we decorate cookies, we eat our cookies with the movie, and it's a really good time and it's really fun. And I like doing it on top of just liking cookies and liking to have that memory with my kids. I like doing it because we watch the Halloween movies that I grew up with. I was always really big into Halloween movies. So we watch like Halloween Town, Twitches, Hocus Pocus, like all the things that I grew up loving. My kids watch now. I don't even know if there's any like new kid Halloween movies because we just watch the ones that I grew up with, and it's so much fun and it's nostalgic for me, and it also just gives them a tradition and I love it. Then another way I'm going to celebrate Samhain this year is by putting Halloween lights outside. I just feel like it's important to light up a dark time. At night, this is Halloween and Samhain like really celebrate how the earth is like darker more than light. Like there's more hours of darkness than light. So that is, I feel like lighting up that part and lighting up the night is important. And then as soon as Halloween's done, I'm going to roll over and put my Christmas decorations outside. So although I'm not decorating as much as I do every year because I am pregnant, I'm trying to like get rid of a bunch of shit. Like I want to be like a minimalist household as much as possible before this baby girl comes. So I'm not going to do as much decorating as I do every year. Like I didn't pull out all my knickknacks, but we're definitely going to put some lights outside and like hang up our little pumpkin light and do a jack-o'-lantern and just fill the house with more light. I'm also going to be celebrating Samhain by casting some sort of ancestor connection spell. This I'm probably going to do on November 1st, on All Saints Day or All Souls Day. just because I'm going to be doing so much on the 31st with my kiddos and with my family in general that like the 31st is a little booked for me. But I think doing it on the first, on the like Catholic Samhain, it works. And also I'm, Roman Catholic, as by birth or whatever, by ancestry. So I think it would work, and it like works well with the specific ancestors that I'm going to be tapping into on that day. Speaking of my ancestors, at some point through October, I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to do this, but I'm going to go back to my grandparents' grave. Now it's both my grandparents' grave. When I used to go there, it was just my grandmother. My grandfather died. He passed away this past May, and I have not been to that grave since. It was a really weird experience for me being there when they were putting my grandfather in the ground. And so it's been kind of difficult for me to go since that day. And I wasn't particularly close to my grandfather or anything like that. It was just really eerie experience, especially because my grandmother's name is my name. And, seeing like an open grave with my name on the headstone, a little weird, not gonna lie. So I haven't been back since. I kind of just wanted to give the space some time to like, grass to grow over and, to be filled back up and for it to look like normal again. So I'm gonna go back this month, and I also have like a bunch of crystals that I had given to my grandmother before my grandfather passed away. Before he passed away, when I was like really like, okay, it's gonna be time soon. I took all the crystals away from her gravesite just because I didn't want to have to rush down there once my grandfather did pass to like get everything so that they wouldn't be like thrown out or anything like that. So I just like brought them back home to keep them safe in the time being. So I'm gonna bring her crystals back, and I'm gonna bring my grandfather his first crystal. So I'm going to do that at some point during the month of October as a Samhain celebration. Like I said in the Mavon episode, I'm very like fluid and relaxed with when I actually like celebrate Wheel of the Year holidays. Obviously, Halloween has its traditions that are done specifically on the 31st, so I will be celebrating that specifically on the 31st. But the more like spiritual aspects of it, like going to my grandparents' gravesite. Firstly, do I really want to go to a grave on Halloween itself? I mean, like I know I'm a witch and everything, but I'm also a highly anxious person, so I could not deal if some sort of ghosty decided to visit me on Halloween. I think I'd just pass out. So I want to be mindful of that, but I also just want to be mindful of not doing too much on one day. There's no award in Spirit Land for doing all your Samhain celebrations on October 31st. Like, you don't get an award for that. So I'm not going to stress myself out to do that. But I do want to do like all of these things. So I'm going to space them out so I don't feel so pressured and so stressed to put out so much energy on the 31st. And the final thing that I'm going to be doing, and I actually am going to do this specifically on October 31st because I want to use the real heightened veil energy, or the real lowered veil energy. I'm going to be doing a connection spell with my my little baby that I'm pregnant with, to communicate with her and talk about our birth and like the plan that, we both want to create together. Like, I think it's really important to be collaborative with your baby. Like, there are certain parts of my birth plan that I'm gonna be doing or gonna be aiming for because I feel like that's what she wants, because I've had, dreams about being in the birth space, and I want to like honor what she's kind of shown me as I've been like asleep, sort of thing, and like what she's shown me that she wants. So like the first thing that like she showed me is like her being born in the water and like me pulling her up. I've never experienced that. I've never caught one of my babies, so I think that's where I'm gonna try to go with this birth. I think that's what she wants me to aim for. At minimum, I'm gonna like try to like touch her, while she's coming out, sort of thing. But that's something we discussed in the Pisces pregnancy episode of this podcast. But anyway, I'm gonna be doing more manifestation towards that, more communicating towards that. Every full moon I've been manifesting with her, and like I'm gonna be manifesting with her on this specific holiday as well. Not every holiday will I be like talking to her and using her, or working with her energy, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like in this one, I want to, because, it's an ancestor holiday. It's one about family, and she's coming into our family. And I want to like honor her and her wishes and like her energy and all that stuff. So I'm going to try to connect with it more while that veil is very thin. So that's all I have for this week's episode of the Jesus Bitch podcast about Samhain. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if it helped you, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're currently listening to us on and give us a rating of 5 stars because, again, that really helps get the word out about the show. And if you're going to be celebrating Samhain using any of the tips that I like laid out here, head over to the Jesus Witch Church Discord group and share with us your plans. We have a whole section for like holidays and Sabbaths. We would love to hear how you're celebrating and how the episode influenced you or like inspired you. That's a better word. I don't like the word influence. Let's use inspire. If you would like to help support the Jesus Witch podcast, there are several different ways to do so in the show notes page, including following me on Instagram and TikTok, subscribing to our Patreon, placing an order on my Etsy shop, or even just sending a donation directly to the show. So now that we are at the final ending part of our episode, it is time to do my favorite part of the Jesus Witch podcast, which is our verse of the day. So today's verse of the day is Psalm 31, verse 24, which says, "Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord." I like this one. It's just one, that's like when you're anxious, you can kind of like say that to yourself, like just be strong, like guard your heart, like just hope in the Lord, like just be strong, just like you're okay. Like it's a good reassurance verse. So that's why I wanted to share it with you guys today in case somebody needed it. So anyway, that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time. Okay? Bye.